My name is Rhys Burns. I'm a reference archivist at the Maryland State Archives, and this is Revealing the Records, a guide to genealogical resources at the Maryland State Archives. Before I start, just out of curiosity, who here has been able to visit us in Annapolis at the Archives? That's a pretty good amount. So, who and what are the Maryland State Archives? We're the central repository for government records of permanent and semi-permanent value, but we also have non-government records in our special collections. We're located at 350 Rowell Boulevard in Annapolis, and our current building, which was built in 1986 after we ran out of space for at the old Hall of Records building, which was on the St. John's campus in Annapolis. We're open Tuesdays through Fridays, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by walk-in or appointment. Our on-site staff can assist first-time researchers or with more in-depth inquiries. In our search room, you can access physical paper records or scanned records on our computers. And then we also have a scanner and photography scan free for your use in our search room to make copies for yourself. Additionally, we do offer online orders for copies of records, but the pricing depends based on the record type that's requested. And you can place an order online by mail-in or a phone call. And I actually want to go back. So if you haven't been on our website in a while, we did get an update to our website, so it's a little bit more modern, hopefully easier to find what you're looking for. And if you haven't been to our search room, you might remember our small desks that are quite difficult if you might have a mobility device, or if you're just looking at something large, you can't really open it up. In August of 2023, we received funding to purchase larger ADA compliant tables. So not only if you have a mobility device, you can easily get in and out, but you can also kind of spread out, look at oversized records, and not feel so cramped. And in our search room, we also have a reference library that you are able to browse and pull books from. And we have an upstairs library in our mezzanine that you can use our library catalog to find records and books from, and then we can collect for you. And then here's our scanner that's in our search room. The only thing that you would need if you wanted to use this scanner is a flash drive, because that's how the PDF scans of the records will get saved. And if you don't have a flash drive, we do sell them on site in the lobby for $5. And then a quick look behind the curtain. So here's an example of a full cart of records. While in our search room, you can request to have up to 3 physical records pulled at a time. But if you schedule an appointment with us, you'll be able to have a full cart of records pulled prior to your arrival, which might save some time on a busier day if you get behind on pulls, and just it's a lot nicer for both patrons and staff. And then here's a quick peek into the climate-controlled stacks. All of our records are kept. The records on site in Annapolis are records that are more commonly used, so a lot of the older, more historical records. We have a warehouse in Woodlawn where our modern records, land record books, court records, court cases are kept. And if you ever need an off-site record, you would need to schedule an appointment and we would have it transferred to Annapolis so you can view it that way. So to do the bulk of your research from home, you're going to want to start by heading to our research guides, which is on the left here in the quick links. And this central listing is kind of the main diving point for most genealogical resources and records in our collection. And there are other things kind of hidden in our website, but this is your main launch pad. So we're going to start with death records. For death records, all of the indexes will be accessible online from home, and any record that is at least 100 years old will also be accessible online from home. You'll see the date ranges that we have, 1898 to 2014, and then Baltimore City is a little bit larger. We have 1875 through 2014. So when you come to the research guide, you'll see the pages split between Baltimore City and the Maryland counties. So for Carroll County, we'd want to click on the Maryland counties, and then the page will expand to show you 2 larger date ranges. When you click on a date range, the page will expand again to show you the indexes listed first, and then the actual series where the certificates are listed second. And actually, a quick note also about accessibility online from home. Anytime it says available online, you'll have full access from home. But if it says available on archive search room computers, it's because it's not yet at that 100-year restriction, and you'll have to come in or place an order to view that. So to get into the actual indexes, you can click directly on the MSA citation that's linked, and that'll take you to a new page, which is the series page for the index. If you scroll down, you'll see that there's a letter for an item for each letter of the alphabet. This relates to the last name of the decedent. And these particular indexes cover a smaller chunk of date range, so 1898 to 1903. As you get more modern, you'll see that there's going to be a separate index for each year. To open the actual indexes, you'll want to look to the links column on the right. And when you click on that, it'll give you two options, either to view the images individually or to view as a multi-page PDF. It's really a personal preference, what you prefer. I prefer the multi-page PDF because you can scroll through as opposed to having to click one by one through each index entry. And so when you open the index, it'll start alphabetical order by the surname. And so I found this example of a certificate that I wanted to pull up. And as a quick note, for death records prior to 1987, you don't necessarily need to check the index as long as you know the name, the date, and the location. It's more helpful to check the index if you don't have any of that information. Post 1987, those records are going to be organized by the certificate number. So you have to check the index to get the certificate number. And so to view the actual record associated with that index entry, you'll go back to the research guide or where we started, and then you'll come down to where the actual certificates are linked. You'll also click on that MSA citation, which will take you to the actual series page for the certificates. When you scroll down, you'll see that each item relates to one county for a specific year and month. Now, I was surprised to see that we do have some earlier dated death certificates here. Unfortunately, a lot of them are very badly damaged, really hard to read, or they're just undated. So you may find luck with those earlier ones, but they're not there to be depended on. To make your search a little easier, because if you see there's 10 plus pages of results when you're in the series, we can use the filter items tool at the center of the page to reduce what you're looking at. And it will always want to start by filtering by the date. And so if you just do the month and the year and then press enter, it'll just show you that year and that month, which makes it a little bit easier on your eyes. And similar to that index, if you click on the links, it'll show you the options to actually open the certificates. And then once you get into the document viewer, the certificates are going to be in alphabetical order by the last name. And then I was able to click through there and find Freddie's certificate. Now I'm going to show a post 1987 death certificate example, which is going to follow a similar path. So you'll want to check that index first, which will take you to the index series. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that post 1987, really in 1973, each year has its own index. And that's because it's a statewide index. So prior to 87, Baltimore City was indexing their own death records, and then the rest of the counties were indexing together. Starting in 1973, the state made it that everything's indexed and filed together. So similarly, you'll click on the links and that'll give you the option to open up the index, and the index will populate and in alphabetical order. The nice thing about these indexes is you can use the Control plus F key on your keyboard to actually search by a name as opposed to having to scroll through. And so as you can see, it'll tell you like there was 7, I believe, different Ridgeleys that popped up, but that top one was, or that highlighted one was who we wanted. And so that entry itself is going to give the name, the date, the age, the county location, and most importantly, on the far right, that certificate number, which is how the actual records are organized. And I just wanted to put this little helpful county code and code screen because I know that the numbers can be confusing. And so to open the actual certificate, we'll go back again to the research guide. We'll select the certificate series. Similarly, I like to filter by the year, and so it's going to look a little different. The description column is the range of certificate numbers in a specific item. So that top item covers certificate number 1 through 500 and so on and so forth. So actually, we can go back really quick. So we needed certificate 1228, which we found is here. And so from home, this is what it will look like since the record is not yet 100 years old. But when you're in our search room, it'll have the option to either open as a multi-page PDF or individual images. And then here is that 2001 death record. Moving on to birth records, pretty similar availability of date ranges, except birth records are restricted for 100 years. So the most recent year we have is unfortunately 1924. Any record outside of those years is at the Division of Vital Records, and they have not let us know if they were going to transfer the 1925 births yet. So I'm not quite sure what the plans are. But you'll see that the research guide for birth records looks very similar, split between Baltimore City and the counties. Clicking on the counties will cause the page to expand. You'll see the indexes are listed first, and then the actual birth records are second. And so we can go to the index, and you'll see that for the counties, it has, again, a chunk of time, and then in this case, a few letters are filed together. You can click on the links tab, which will show you how you can open that index. And then once you're in the index, these indexes for the birth records are actual physical books. So it kind of has that intro page, and then you can scroll through and start to see the listing. And something to note, if you're ever looking for birth records, is that it usually will give you the name of the child, but sometimes you'll see if it ever is blank, there is no name of the child given. That might just be they didn't fill it out on the certificate, the name, or they just didn't index it. But similar to the death records, you don't necessarily need to check the indexes unless you don't know when the person was born and where. There are no certificate numbers for the county birth certificates. If you were looking at Baltimore City, they did have certificate numbers for their birth records, but the counties did not. And so once you have that information from the index, you can go back to the research guide. You can come down to the actual birth records series, which will open in a new tab. Again, we do have some earlier dated birth records, but poorly in poor condition and undated and not the best to rely on. But if you scroll down, you'll see again, each county, month, and year has its own item. You can similarly filter by the month and year to make what you're looking at a little bit less. And then you can click on the links, which will show you how you can open it. And then it will take you into the actual document viewer to see the certificates. They're supposed to be in alphabetical order by last name, but our birth records are a little messy sometimes. And so you'll see that this first page, it's an S, I believe, last name. Just be aware when you're going through that they might be sometimes, but not always in alphabetical order. So this is the first sample I found, that birth record from 1898, and then the second one from that same index page that I had found from 1907. And so another thing you'll see at the top, we do not have the birth records post 1924, but we do hold the indexes for 1925 to 1950. So you can do the research to figure out if somebody was born in those years. We just can't provide you with the actual birth record. There are certain instances where our staff can do what we call a birth record extract. So we can see the record and just give you an idea of the child's name, the date of birth, and the parents' names, but we can't show you the physical record, but we can at least give you that basic genealogical information. And so this was just a sample of a 1925 birth in the certificate or in the index, but like I mentioned, can't see the actual record. And so we're moving into marriage records. The date range varies by the county, but the general rule of thumb is mid 1600s through 2013 is the availability. This research guide's a little different. It is for each county, but quite similar to birth and marriages or birth and deaths, that if you click on the county, it'll expand and have you select between two date ranges. And so the first one I picked a pre-1950, and so you'll see the indexes are listed first again, and then the actual records. The earlier records are usually just single line ledger books because the state of Maryland did not start creating marriage certificates until 1914. So you'll see a lot of the times that these marriage licenses don't look like what we would think a marriage license would be. It's going to just kind of be a page or a line in a book. And the same for the marriage records. It's usually just a single ledger line of when they were married. And so this is just the sample page for that marriage license collection. And then this is a sample of the actual book. So you'll just see it very basic, gives the date and the names of the two parties and then the minister. And then for the marriage record, you'll see a little bit different. It does look like it's a license, but then it's also just very basic details about the marriage. And then lastly, this is going to be a sample of a certificate prior to 1950. And these ones are organized by SoundX code. I didn't want to get too in the weeds with the SoundX code, but we can, if anybody has a question about that at the end, we can come back. But it is associated with the last name of the groom. And so again, since these are not fully 100 years old, if you tried to access from home, this is what it would look like, but you can view the actual certificate in our search room on our computers. And this is an example of a 1924 marriage. So for records post 1950, they're going to look a little bit more like the birth and death records from earlier. So you'll see that we have indexes listed first, and then the actual records. You can click directly on the citation to take you to the index series, and typically there's about one or two indexes for each year because they kind of split it in the alphabet in half. You can also click on the links tab, which will see the different options for opening. And then the marriage indexes sometimes have a few extra pages at the front, which you can scroll through, and then you'll see organized in alphabetical order. The other nice thing about the post-1950 marriage records is we have indexes that are organized alphabetically by the groom and by the bride. So if you only maybe know one name, or if there's a more unique last name, you can always kind of take your pick of who you're going to search through or search by. And so you'll get the entry, which will give the names of both parties, the date, the certificate number, and then that county location. And to view the actual record, you can come back to the research guide, find the right series based off the year. You can filter the items by just the year, which will bring up just 1957. And then you'll want to find the right item with the matching certificate number. And then you'll be able to pull up via our search room computers the actual marriage certificate. Oftentimes, especially for genealogy, we have patrons that are looking for records, vital records, outside of that time frame. And so if you're ever looking for a birth, marriage, or death prior to 1898, we recommend looking at church records to try to find a marriage, a baptism, or a death through the church. The dates and what we have varies by county and what denominations have donated records to us. So the church records are not through our guide to government records, it's through our special collections. And to get to the religious records page, you click the button at the top there to get to the religious records. And that'll take you to the Maryland Religious Records Guide. You can browse the records by the denomination name or the county location, or you can use the search bar at the top to just kind of keyword search to see what we might have more broadly. So when I used the by county, this is just the sample that came up for Carroll County, and it will give it the listing in alphabetical order. So from this sample listing, if you ever see that it just gives the name and location of the denomination, unfortunately, that means we don't hold records from them. In this case, for Calvary United Methodist Church, it's linked to their website because they have their own records keeping. Not every church does, but we have tried to make as easy of a process to get records if you have to contact the church directly as possible. But for the other samples, like the Calvary Lutheran Church, we don't hold records for them, but we have what we call the WPA Historical Survey File, which is an inventory that was completed in the 1930s and 40s and listed every known church in the state by county. And these inventories may provide information about the church and its records keeping processes, but the level of detail varies based on who wrote the actual survey. So it may include church history, denomination history, diocese or circuit, minister, descriptions of the records, church and records location, and whether or not defunct. And then from these two samples, for Church of the Ascension, whenever you see an MSA SC number, that means that we do hold records. And the same for Zion Lutheran, we hold records, and we also have a WPA file for them. So when you find a denomination that you want to look at records from, this is the collection page. And so to see what you can access online from home, you'll want to click on the microfilm series at the bottom. And this will take you to the microfilm inventory. From home, if the top where it says SCM, that's the microfilm real name. If that's hyperlinked in blue, that means you'll be able to access it from home. But if it is just black text, unfortunately, you won't be able to open the scans from home. Some of our church records have post-1940 baptisms, which are restricted by the church, so they can't just be accessible from home, but they can be accessed via our search room computers. And so to open the actual scans, you can click directly on the microfilm reel, and that will take you to the page viewer. And so this is just the first page for that St. Michael's Parish. And then if you can click through, and here's a sample of baptismal records from St. Benjamin's Church. And then here's another sample of records from the same item, but these are 1828 vestry minutes. And then another sample collection. Again, you'll want to come to the microfilm series. And I wanted to use this example because when the description is nicely laid out like that, that is a sign that that is the order of the records in the scan. So the first thing when you open the microfilm reel is going to be the 1843 to 64 vestry minutes, and then 1869 to 1916, and so on and so forth. It's also nice because in this case, the parish registers are indexed, and that is in the scans as well. So you don't necessarily have to scroll and click through to figure out, well, where did the parish registers start? You just can know that it's going to be about a third of the way through the total scans. And so again, if you just click directly on the microfilm reel, it will open in the document viewer. And then this is a sample of vestry accounts from the Church of the Ascension. And then this is an example of a parish register from that same denomination. And then I pulled some examples of the WPA historical survey files, which this one was quite sparse. The one I pulled, it literally was just a paper that said the name of the church. And then this other one was also sparse that I pulled, and it pretty much just also gave the denomination, and I believe it mentions, yeah, just really the name of the denomination. Okay, so the next record type is land records, which admittedly could be a presentation all on its own, since it is so vast and can be extremely tricky. It can be a good place to start, though, if you maybe only have names and locations of people that you want to research. And so the date range varies again by county, but land records were reported from the beginning of the colony through the present day. And land records can include deeds and mortgages, but you may also be able to find bills of sale, manumissions, and certificates of freedom. So all Maryland land records can be accessed online from home for free through mdlandrec.net. You'll just have to make an account with an email address. When you log in, the records are broken down by county, and so you can select your county from that top left drop down, which will take you to the kind of starting page for the county. And this is helpful if you already know a book and page number. You can jump straight to that volume from this page. The indexes for land records can be accessed under the active indices on the left-hand listing of options. And that will take you to the indices page, and then the active indices drop down is where you can select between the grantor or grantee indexes. And after you make your selection, you'll get taken to another page where it's broken down by last name. And in this case, this is the grantee index for 1837 to 1951. And to actually open the indexes, on the far right, if you click on the MSA citation, which is linked in blue, that will open the indexes in the same tab. And so once you're in the indexes, you can change the page either using the jump to new page tool or the next button that's over to the right. I'm just going to quickly show how helpful land records can be, because not only do they give information about property, but they can reference other record types. So in this particular case, this land record is referencing a patent. And so you'll see it says being comprised of parts of the tract of land called the resurvey on John's Lot in Ohio. You can take those two tract names given in this land record and actually find the patent. And so this is, I just pulled up the patent that was associated. I'm going to cover patents a little bit later. Land records can also reference probate records. So in this case, this land record is referencing a will because the sale of the land was tied to the estate of this person and his heirs selling the property. And And then here's the actual will that is associated from that land record. I'm going to cover probate records also later. And then lastly, land records can also reference equity or court cases. So in this case, it's referencing a divorce, and you'll see it gives us a case number, which you can find through our equity records research guide. And here is that divorce case. This is the physical case on the left. And then on the right is the final decree of divorce. So for patent records, you can either find patents through doing a title search on a property or by searching our early settlers index. Our land patents don't have their own research guide. It's kind of nested through the land records guide. And then if you click on patents to the far right, it'll take you to our patent page. So if you were interested in doing a title search on a property, you would need to know the current address, and then you would want to go to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation website, or SSTAT, to get the most current deed reference. And after you select the county, there's a few different options to search. The most common is by street address. And so after you put in all of that information, you'll get taken to a page with a lot of tax information. The most important thing is the deed reference at the top to the right there, which is the book and the page number for the actual land record. You can then take that and go to MD Land Rec and jump to the deed. And once you see the deed, you'll want to look, usually on the first page, it'll say being the same property by, and then it'll give you a date and then a book and a page number for the immediately preceding deed. And so a sample title search that I was able to complete for this, you can kind of just track back. You'll see I started in 2024 for this property and didn't find a reference to the patent until 1865. And the way that you'll know that you found the patent is that the reference will change from giving you a book and page number to then saying being part of a tract of land called. And so in this case, I found that the property I was researching is part of a tract of land called Barbados. And so each county in our collection has a patent tract index. So if you know the name of a tract of land, you can come here and search to get the book and page number reference for the actual patent record. And so, and what you can do, instead of filtering by date, you can change the column to the description column, which is where the actual tract name is, which will pull up any matches. And you'll see on the left, it gives us that book and page number for both the actual patent and then the certificate, which would just be the certificate of survey to just show that was kind of the final proof that the land, which was previously unowned, was now patented and owned. And so through the land records research guide and then patents, that will take you here. And so once you have a book and page number reference, you can go straight to the patent records series. And I go a little bit more in detail with the actual patent records series, but this is another sample patent for that Barbados. And so another way that you can find patent records is through the Early Settlers Index, which is listed on our land patent research guide. When you go to that Early Settlers Index, you can search by just a last name, first and last name. You can always play around with keywords in the description. And what this is indexing is land that was granted typically for head rights, whether it be for service and or transportation into the colony. And so this is just a sample listing of results. And so you'll see it usually gives when the person came, where they might have came, and then it gives the reference to that book and page number for the patent. So there's two different references that you could use. You can either use the transcript, which is usually given first, or you can use the original, which is listed second. The transcript and versus the original. So there's the original land patent volumes, which was filed when the patent was filed. But a few years after the headright system was abolished, the land office decided to go back and kind of transcribe all of the prior books since they weren't in good condition and just to kind of records keep. So we always recommend looking at the transcript because they're usually in better quality than the originals, but we do hold both in our collections. And so with either reference, it gives you first that book name, which could be a number, or if it's the original, it's usually going to be letters, and then the page number. And so if you come back to the land patents research guide, and then the patent records series, and if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the actual records. The book name is listed in the description column, and it's also nice because it's going to tell you these are the transcribed books, but it'll tell you what the original volume was. So like that third item, it says 2, and then transcript of Z&A. That's just helpful to know which volume was being transcribed. And so once you find the needed item, you'll be able to access all of our patents online from home. And there's usually a lot of different either patents or transactions on one page. The reference that we found is here at the bottom, and it shows Catherine Adams was selling her rights to John Waterton. And so probate records, which can include wills, inventories, accounts, and estates, but also renunciations, petitions, and indentures. The date ranges, again, varies by county, but we do have colonial era records, which is 1634 to 1777. And then for Carroll County specifically, we have probate records spanning 1837 to 1981. And this research guide is broken down again by the county. And so when you select your county, it'll give you 2 options. And I didn't want to focus on the colonial era records. So for the post 1778 records, you'll see what indexes we have and then the actual record series. Unfortunately for Carroll County, we only have a wills index. So if you ever wanted to do research into accounts, estates, or inventories, we would direct you to the Carroll County Register of Wills because they still hold the physical indexes. They just haven't transferred them to us. They would be able to search the index to get either the estate number or the book and page number, and then you would be able to come to us and we could help you find the actual record. And so this is just a sample from the will index. And so you'll see on the far left, it gives the book and page number for the actual record, the person's name, their executor or administrator, and then the date, which pointed to this record on microfilm. And so if you ever were seeing this in the search room and you wanted to see the physical, we would gladly pull the physical will book for you since the microfilm is poorly damaged. And then I also just pulled an inventory because I wanted to show a sample of an inventory. The actual inventory starts on the right-hand page and then continues all the way through pages. This particular individual owned a lot of property at the time of his death. And so then we have court records, which can include divorces, foreclosures, name changes, adoptions, and more. And these records are organized by the case number. The dates vary by county, but we have 1837 to 1990 for Carroll County. And so the research guide, if you scroll down, you'll see it's organized by the county. Clicking on your county will expand to show you the index and then the actual records, kind of similar to probate records. If you're looking for an equity case outside of that 1928 to 1953 timeframe, we would ask you to reach out to the Carroll County Circuit Court to see if they can help you get a case number there. And then we would be able to help you find the actual case. We just don't have the indexes that cover outside of this shorter time frame. And so the index can be accessed online from home. And I was able to find this first sample here. And then, so to view the actual record, you'll come back to the research guide. You'll come down to where the records are linked. And then when you're in the actual series, you'll see to the far right, there's going to be, and sometimes to the left, the ranges of numbers. That's going to be your case number range. And none of our equity records are scanned and accessible. And so when you pull, you'll have to visit us to pull the physical, or you'd have to place an order. And so this is that sample equity case. And then I also was able to find an adoption in the indexes, which we were also able to kind of find and then pull. As a quick note for adoptions, any adoption that occurred after May 31st, 1947 are sealed by law, and a court order must be obtained for viewing. So this one was 1943, so just under the wire. And then we have naturalization or immigration records. Again, the dates vary by county, but we have 1869 to 1953 for Carroll County. We have the Immigration Naturalization Records Research Guide, which you can also find links to patent records here. But then if you scroll down, you'll see the main indexes for our immigration records. The primary index that you would want to search for Carroll County would be that S1415, or the second one that's linked. But it may be helpful if you're searching for a family member to check the Baltimore City and Baltimore County, or the S1416 index, because you never know if somebody might have just traveled to the city to naturalize. And so this is the S1415 index page. You'll see it, each item covers the same time frame, but it's by the first 3 letters of the last name. And so when you find an index card, it'll give you the name of the person. Usually it tells you when they filed their intent, and then when they were admitted, and then it gives you the reference to the book and page number where the actual record is kept. To figure out where you need to go from there, if you go back to the index and hit expand on the series description, you're going to see a lot of different record series referenced. But since you knew it was going to be a Carroll County, you can find which series based off the year. And then again, our naturalization records are also not scanned and accessible from home. So you could either come in to view it or place an order. And now we have newspapers. Similar to the church records, the availability is by county and what has been donated to us into our special collections. From the special collections guide, you can click on the newspapers button at the top, and you can view the newspapers by either the title, date, or the county. This is a sample listing for Carroll County. If you ever see entries that are grayed out, like those bottom three, that means that unfortunately they are not within our collection. But if it's more of a white color, we do have it. And so this is just a sample, or this is the collection page rather, for the Carroll Record newspaper. And lots of information on this page. We won't hold every single issue of every newspaper or for a specific publication. So that's why at the bottom, we link other institutions that we know and that we likely have partnerships with that has the issues that we might not have. But then it also usually gives some context on the actual publication. To access any of the scans from home, you'll want to go to that microfilm inventory, which will take you to the microfilm listing, and you'll see it's broken down by year. And again, like the church records, it's going to be in that order. So if we were to open this top one, the first issue would be November 28, 1869, and the last one would be December 30th, 1910. And you also will click directly on the microfilm reel to open the scans. If it's not blue like this from home, that means you unfortunately can't get to it from home, but you likely will be able to get to it through our search room computers. And so then this was just a sample I pulled of an 1894 edition of the Carroll Record, and then a 1977 edition. And other special collections items can include photographs, maps, biographies, family items, and objects. Again, these were donated to us for preservation, so it's not going to always be fully comprehensive. You can access these through the main page of the special collections by doing a keyword search. And so I was just doing keyword searches when I was putting together this presentation, and I found that we have this wonderful collection of photographs called the Carroll County Photographs Collection, and it really is just a treasure trove of images. And there was so many pages of senior class photos, people of importance in the county. I also found that we have Bible records for Carroll County. It seemed that Miss Brown, when she donated this to us, she didn't want to donate the actual family Bible, which is understandable. So we worked with her to transcribe this, so we at least had that information, and she was able to hold on to the actual Bible. Maps can be accessed through the button at the top, and you can either just browse our featured map collections, or you can search by the cartographer name or the map title. And going back to patents, I was able to find that we have a map collection of Carroll County patents, which is really helpful because most of the time these original survey drawings from the patents don't always exist. And if they do, it's difficult to figure out where exactly they are. So in this case, a private researcher put together all of the Carroll County tracts and their surviving surveys to make it easier for other researchers. But unfortunately, this is not something that exists for every Maryland county. And then lastly, we have some other digital Maryland history resources. From our homepage, if you go to Maryland History at the top, this page has a lot of great resources, such as the Maryland 400 website, the Maryland Historical Properties database, and then the Archives of Maryland online website. I want to focus first on the Study of the Legacy of Slavery in Maryland website. If you're ever doing research on enslaved individuals, this is a great resource. We have interactive maps for each county that you can click on by the district, and you'll be able to zoom in and you can see landowners and kind of get an idea of who was where. We also have the database, which you can just very basically search, but then you can also search it a lot more in depth by the owner name, the enslaved person's name, the enslaved status, their occupation. And this can provide references to all sorts of different record types. In this case, I found some census records, pardon records, and then a lot of runaway ads. And when you're in the database, if you click on either the open pop-up or the details, that'll bring you to a page that if there is a record that's been scanned, it's linked right there. And so in this case, if you just click to view, it will pop up in a new window, the actual runaway ad. Other times it will give an MSA citation for a record that you can then kind of make a note of. And if it's not something that's scanned, you can always have it pulled for you or order a copy. And then the other resource is the My East Maryland Indigenous Records website. This is a newer website from us, and it is all things Indigenous persons of Maryland. If you go to the browse page, you can browse by tribe. And when you click on any tribe, it will show you any scanned documents that there are. And there's usually going to be the actual scan, but then there's also a transcription available. And so I just wanted to pull this 1666 treaty. This has a special place because this is one of the first old records that I was able to physically see as an archivist. And the signatures of the native or indigenous persons is just very interesting to see next to the, European typical signatures. And that is all that I have. So please, any and all questions are welcome.
Yes. When were Baltimore City and Baltimore County marriage licenses segregated from each other?
Baltimore City and County.
Yeah.
That is,
For example, if I go to a family search database of marriage licenses, or just marriages, those today, it seems like it always shows up Baltimore County, even when I suspect it was in the city. So they must have been held, I'm thinking, together for a long time before they were moved to different agencies.
yes, I don't know exactly when.
1850.
1850. Thank you. 1850.
Yeah, Towson didn't become a county seat until 1850. So prior to that, the records would have been in Baltimore City. Okay.
But called Baltimore County.
I know it's confusing. It's hard to get records out of Baltimore City anyway.
Yeah. Yes.
That land rec site, was that a .gov?
It is. It's a .net. I'll pull it up here. Yeah, it's a .net website. I wanted to pull it up, see if it's, yes, it's mdlandrec.net.
There was a cemetery called Laurel Hill, which was along Bel Air Road. And it was pretty much destroyed back in, I think, the 1950s. And some of the gravestones were leaked back to Carroll County, but just a small sample of them. And they're trying to recreate from the death records, who was actually buried there. Is that project still ongoing? Does anybody here know?
I think it is still ongoing, but I haven't heard anything about it for a while. So I don't say absolutely.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that project personally. I know that we at the archives have been working with the Brewer Hill Cemetery, which is in Annapolis, to do a similar project to figure out who was buried there and be able to name them, but I'm not sure about that whole project now.
It's a huge cemetery and, yeah, it's a huge project to go back over all those records. Thank you. So I have a question, very specific, with the same. I'm looking for a 1696 surveyor of items that she has in her records and has records. I have been to the archives many times. I have been online to the archives many times. I've just called the St. Mary's Historical Society and St. Mary's College Archivists. Nobody has a clue. And no one in the archives has been able to tell me where I can find what she used to, or her interns used to record that document. And last person suggested that they would have her records, her notes at the archives.
Yes.
That could be searched. I mean, what is that different than her card file then?
Yes. So for lack of a better word, the card catalog was kind of the fruit of her research, right? And so since she worked for us, after she passed, she or her estate donated a lot. I'm not sure if it was all, but a lot of her research notes, which they were taken and made into a special collection. I don't remember what the collection number is, but it's the Dr. Lois Carr Green collection.
The women's and men's careers, you mean? Or is there something else different?
There's something else different which can be found through the special collections. And it should just be, I've seen the boxes, they're like the clamshell boxes, and they have all of her different research notes, kind of write-ups, reports. There's some essays that she did. The one thing about that is the collection isn't indexed, but it is described in the catalog, so you get a sense of what's in each box.
Well, the St. Mary said we can put volume number and a page. I don't have to have that page because I guess it wasn't relevant to me because I mean, some of those pages go on and on with the same material depending, on how it's worded. But they had no clue. And I noticed when they said that on the page I have, they had reference to marriage license or will. And it said it was volume 1, page 113. Well, I know it's page 113, but I had no clue what volume 1 would be because when you look for it, it says it's in book 6. So, I mean, is there somebody specifically that I could ask that would have a clue of how to do this? I mean, I asked other questions and I got it for Anne or the family and that thing, but this one for St. Mary's, everybody says, and you have no answer.
Yeah, I mean, I have colleagues that are a lot more experienced with not only the card catalogs, but her actual collection. Two of my colleagues that are research archivists, I think they would certainly be able to help, whether it would be in person or if you wanted to email us.
Well, I did email several times.
Oh, okay.
Some of the responses made no sense at all. One person said, well, just type this in and your name will come right up. And I'm going, okay, well, it was very,
Yeah.
they're very helpful, but that not for this particular person.
Okay.
I was just curious because I got so many different answers.
Round of applause for Rhys. Thank you.